potentially, and then come back in. That was just coincidence. um, we're here with Rob Haar of Sparkbox and Matthew Griffin of Bearded once again for a special episode of our Code and Spy podcast where we talk to people running successful agencies. And as a new agency myself, I just kind of ask them questions. It's a way to record a conversation that I would have liked to have anyway and make it available to a bunch of people that may find it useful. So let's go and start with Matt and do some introductions and say what you're doing these days, and maybe give out some links so people can look you up a little bit more.
Sure. So my name's Matt Griffin. I am also here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I am in my 7th year with a company called Bearded, and we make web things. And so I will put some links in here. Here is Bearded. Is this the right place to put my links? Is that good?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. So I have the Bearded. We also did a thing, check these before I put them in here, but caution to the wind. We did a thing a few years ago called Wood Type Revival, where we like letterpress printing, and we went and got a whole bunch of wooden typefaces that are no longer in the digital world, or never entered the digital world rather, and we turned them into digital fonts, and that was fun. And now we're working on what is sure to be the albatross around my neck forever, a documentary called What Comes Next is the Future about the web, which is both thrilling and terrifying because I don't know how to make a movie, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually, and we can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more. You're the most diverse agency in this podcast because you're doing web and woodworking almost and movie making.
And only with 7 people.
Exactly. Yeah, let's get some intro from Rob and see what he's working on these days.
Yeah, I am Rob Haar. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Sparkbox out of lovely Dayton, Ohio. We've been around. We are also in our 7th year doing the web things. We are a design and development web studio. We love doing web stuff. I am currently in Madison, Wisconsin at a conference, and I have been on a traveling tear as of late, and I've got a couple weeks left, and I'm looking forward to kind of easing back into normal life back in Dayton, Ohio. A couple links. Here's our website. We also run a workshop series called Maker Series, part of Build Right, where we bring people like Karen McGrain, Ethan Marcotte, Dan Mall, Brad Frost into Dayton, Ohio when we're in workshops. We also have live stream tickets, so if you're so inclined, you can view from anywhere, unless you want to make the trip to Dayton, which it would be awesome to have you join us in person.
Yeah, Rob's the Build Right series is very impressive on the whole. It's got beautiful marketing, beautiful program, bringing really impressive people to Dayton, Ohio for really great workshops. So everyone should check that out because it's just in general a really awesome thing he's doing.
I've never heard of any of those people myself. Ethan
He's the one that goes by Boop on Twitter.
Boop.
Yeah, Boop.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. The bold black and white cartoons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, now I'm with you.
Yeah. I guess a little bit about myself. I'm in my first year of running an agency called Builder Codeworks, and just working my way through it. I've been lucky, well connected throughout the community, so I've had a nice steady year of work and nice flow of clients, doing more and more training, more and more development of products with some. I've worked on the issue from the last episode of getting some people to help me out. Thanks for the link, Matt. Builderworks.co is our website. And I also run Code and Supply, which is where we're hosting this podcast. It's community first here in Pittsburgh, software community, and we're doing some special things like this podcast and special events. So check out codeandsupply.co for more of that information. The reason for this podcast is I was reading a Sparkbox blog post. It's fun to say that. It's got a nice cadence. About this once a month meals client you had, and it kind of, the post itself was largely about the entire process with once a month meals, but something that struck me in the end was the handoff to an internal team. So, Rob, maybe you could start off by briefly discussing that project and maybe just giving a summary of the blog post for people that haven't read it.
Yeah, 10,000-foot view on that is this is a startup we've been working with for several years now. She came to us with some ideas, and she was running a membership site and wanted to build some software around it. She was doing everything by hand and had some big ideas, and she felt like that there was this community and this idea that she could unlock as part of freezer cooking. Apparently, it's this concept of being able to cook a month's worth of meals all in one day, and you freeze them and you can warm them up. And there is some, she learned a bunch of lessons about how to be able to orchestrate cooking for 12 hours or 8 to 12 hours in a day, and how to optimize that to get all the meals. So when she showed up, we did a bunch of work. We started with a patent, and that was the first time that I had ever really written an entire software patent, or anybody on the team, and that was an interesting experience. And then we kind of set forth and built her a bunch of software, and took all of her ideas about how freezer cooking should be done, and wrote this giant engine around them that gives people shopping lists, it combines recipes, and optimizes for cooking day instructions, and all kinds of other stuff. And it was kind of a really interesting project. But the whole time during this project, the goal was to basically be her technical partner up until the point when we could help her hire her own team. That was pretty much the goal from the beginning, and that kind of came down to a conversation that I had with the owner of Once a Month Meals, Trisha, at the very beginning, and said, "Hey, if this is going to be successful, you're going to need to have a team eventually. You cannot it doesn't make sense for you to work with any studio, let alone Sparkbox forever." So at this point, she's grown her team from just her to, I think she has 6 full-time employees now, including 1 full-time developer. We're in the process right now of helping her interview and hire a 2nd full-time developer. We've actually got interviews scheduled for Monday to talk to somebody new. And that was kind of the goal all along, is to basically help her make good decisions, prove there was a business, and then launch it so that she can take off and run it herself as a profitable SaaS product.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with Matt on this one, because I feel like you you do a lot of web-based, like design-focused products for customers. So there's probably a lot more handing off once something is kind of done. Like there's definitely like a more done state for web things, because you're going to this vision, and then there's a place to go and there's a place to stop. Whereas like a software product might have more features added and things like that. Is there anything that you do early on in the process with a client to maybe set up that vision of when it's done, and how if there's any transition related to it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of kinds of projects we do now. Over the years, we've shifted. So when we started out, we were doing a lot of small scale projects that were really full stack. soup to nuts. Sometimes we wrote content, sometimes the things I wrote for headlines in a Photoshop comp ended up in a final website, and this is maybe like 2009 or whatever. Sometimes we'd go out and take our own photography because the client didn't have photography. So we were working with a lot of small nonprofits that had almost no in-house capabilities at all, except for the 3 people who worked there. So we just do a lot of stuff just to get a website up. And then that website would go up and remain largely unchanged other than the content edits they're making through the CMS. What we found was that we were more interested in solving more complicated problems, and that brochure sites got kind of boring after a while. So we would just, we kept finding things that were more challenging, right? Working on web applications and things with more complicated user workflows and processes that we had to figure out, and particularly in a responsive world that became interesting challenges, and started focusing our energies less on building an entire product that would then sit there and remain unchanged, but sort of as to what Rob's saying about their client, helping to build things that ultimately we knew we couldn't maintain for them, or would be impractical to maintain. We're pretty expensive as far as the work we do, partly because we're very focused on solving difficult problems, on good user experience. And there's a point in an application where it needs maintenance and may need minor feature changes or whatever. It needs sort of a smaller amount of work, but it's not really rethinking the application. It's maybe a skill set that can be encompassed in 1 or 2 people. So we found ourselves drawn to organizations that had some amount of resources, maybe even had all of the things we have. They may have designers and developers and user experience people, but just didn't have the breadth or focus of experience that we had in solving these specific kinds of user experience problems. So they'd hire us to sort of figure out the thing, and work on initial designs, maybe a subset of the full designs, or maybe the full designs, and then ultimately they were going to finish building out the thing. Or we may collaborate with them in building out the thing, and sort of augment their team in that way. And then as our expertise becomes less and less useful as they get further into the project, there's this kind of graph of what we're doing and what they're doing, right? And ours sort of slopes down and theirs sort of ramps up. And the way we accomplish that is not by having a handoff at the end of the project. What I tend to find is if we go and build this thing, and it seems to solve the problem pretty well for what we know at the time, and then we hand it off to another group and say, okay, you guys take it from here, see you later, there's no amount of documentation and training videos and whatever we could produce, or like hour-long meetings or even day-long meetings, where we could make sure that once we disappeared, they would be handling things in a way that would meet everyone's satisfaction, where they wouldn't be frustrated looking at the code or looking at the designs and not understanding how we got there, and saying either, God, I hate working on this thing, I don't know how it got here, or just forget it, I'm going to scrap this thing and just do it all over myself anyway, so I know it happened, or it's doing the right thing, or whatever. Avoiding situations like that means that you have to involve them in the process from the beginning. So we start out now at the very beginning of the project with a big kickoff where we involve stakeholders and as well as lower level people in their hierarchy that are actually doing the work. So developers, designers, whoever, with us to sort of visualize what the thing's going to be. And then every week we get together with them if they're local, or virtually if they're not, and we'll pair with them on critical tasks. So whether that's like sketching out what some views might look at, or defining content types, or actually coding up some stuff, or sitting down to design a thing, or doing decision-making processes around a workflow, like we're going to have them working on that with us. And that does us 2 major things. One is it avoids that big problem of them not being happy with it at the end, because they helped make the decisions. So we have more accurate decision making that's informed by all the knowledge they have internally, and by the requirements that they have that we might not know about. And it also trains them on the product so that they actually know what was built because they helped us build it. They understand the decisions that went into it because they were part of it, and it makes more sense to them. It's a logical system that they understand from the inside out. So that we're fond of saying now that there's no handoff at the end. We're handing off throughout the entire project. The whole thing is a process of getting them to the point where the thing that they live with is the thing they want to live with.
Yeah, that's a, a great ideal, I think. How, Rob, do you have any different approaches to setting up a project from the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's our goal for all of our clients is to work ourselves out of a job at the end of it. At least for most of them. There are some clients that we are in long-term partnerships with that I don't know that we'll continue working with for a long time, and they want that. That's the way they view us. But most of the people we start new engagements with at this point want to build an internal team. Um, about 2 years ago, the big scare in our industry is people are building internal teams and web studios will die and all this stuff like that. And people were like, there was conference talks about it and blog posts, and people were freaking the hell out about it. And it was really interesting because, I kind of looked at it and said, no, 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 this isn't a problem. This is an opportunity. Like, let's invest in training. Let's invest in handoffs. Let's invest in partnering, helping people build up internal teams. Because chances are that'll set us up really up for the next project. And even if we help one group build their team, there's probably other groups that can use our expertise inside a big organization that would love to have us help, the hiring process, the training process. So we try to make sure that we pair a lot of our estimates with training, with our workshops and that kind of stuff, so that we're doing that part. But we also are trying to level up their staff as we go. And sometimes that involves doing the handoff continuously, kind of like Matt said, and sometimes that's more a focus thing at the end where we're bringing them in and there's this defined transition period. For some of our projects where we're doing more of the design, the UX, the strategy, and the front-end templates up front, that happens during like the integration phase. We'll do the templates in-house, and then we'll work with them for the 2 to 3 months it takes to integrate those templates into their bigger system, and that becomes the transition plan. That works out really, really well because we can hand over the pattern libraries and all those things like that and teach them what we work and what we've done, but also then adapt that and have rolled their process into it so it becomes maintainable. You can't, it's really, really difficult to walk into some place that has an established culture and established rules and way they work and to say, do things like this. It's more of like, share me what works well and what doesn't work well and what do you want to fix. And let's adapt what we're building and what we're doing around their process they have a little bit because they're way more likely to maintain it that way.
Cool. Yeah, so both of you kind of had this built-in assumption on your strategies of, an existing team. And the once-a-month meals thing, you kind of came in where it seemed like there's just a CEO, and that's it. How did you help with that process, and how did you help build that team?
Yeah, it was like with her in particular, it took constant expectation setting. Like she was going from a content business to a technology-based business, and trying to educate her on what that meant and how to think about the world and what being a software company means took every month in our meetings and every week in our meetings can just reinforcing like, hey, here's how you think about this. Here's how to frame this conversation. Bringing her in, letting her see the issues, letting her see what we're thinking about for his architecture, explain it to her, and just try to level her up as much as possible. And then when it came time, like, for her to hire somebody, we kind of said, hey, we think now is the time to start building your team internally. We helped write the job description. We did help with the interviews. We did I think a 2-week process with their first developer she brought on, and trained him about all the architecture stuff. And slowly we've given him, with her direction, more and more of the responsibility where, we kind of, like for a while, he was more reporting up through us and working on things in our direction, and then we transitioned to a place where, we are starting to take more direction for him on some things, but we have a very open, collaborative relationship with him and her, and probably with whoever they're going to hire next of, we still kind of own certain parts of the system. We own the overall design of it, the overall architecture, the way the system's constructed. But he is taking more and more of the responsibilities on, and eventually I think we'll see a day where we're not involved at all with that client. And that will be the that'll be success for me that we've launched a business.
You know, there are a couple of things that Rob mentioned that jumped out at me too. Earlier when he was talking about this whole like people are building internal teams. Oh no, what happens to agencies? You know, which is really a problem that only agencies care about, of course, because no one else cares who does the work, particularly. But I think that there are a couple of major differences between being in an agency environment and being in an in-house environment that create different strengths and weaknesses and allow us to play really well together. That are just the nature of the beast. And that is that when you're in an in-house team, you tend to be working on the same product or set of products over a very long period of time. And the maintenance of that product and the stability of your user base are of utmost concern, as they should be, right? If you've got 1 million users using your web product, you don't want to upset them, right? You don't want to rock the boat. So you have to make sure things are rock solid, and you have to be pretty careful about things like deployments. In our environment, an agency environment, and I use that term very loosely, agency, but in the whatever it is we are environment, we move much more quickly. We're really used to short engagements where we iterate quickly, come up with new ideas, implement those ideas, get proof of concepts, and then get out. Because the meter's running. So we want to give them the most value we can and then let them stop paying us, right? So it's a very different kind of mindset in terms of pace that we run at. There's the other major difference I find is perspective, which comes from the same thing. They're a little closer to the product, right? They spend every day with it. They live every day with it. There are certain assumptions that they've internalized, or maybe user feedbacks that they've internalized. It's something I think you see a lot, particularly in support departments, where when you ask them what they want out of the product, they will tell you in terms of the negative feedback they no longer want to receive. When this goes wrong, I get 100 calls that say there's a problem, or I get 1,000 emails that say this is a problem. Let's avoid that. So they always ask for this thing, so make sure you give them that thing. Our perspective is going to be coming at it from a totally different outside look, right? We don't know all of their internal politics and shenanigans. We don't know what their users have freaked out about before in the past and what horrible meetings they've had to sit through about it. So we don't have that baggage. And I think my opinion is that that allows us to be a little closer to a user perspective because we're kind of coming in blind. We get to come in and say, okay, let's pretend we've never seen this thing before. We don't know how the innards work, which is easy because we haven't and we don't. And then we try to understand it as a user. So those two things, that rapid pace and that outside perspective, allow us to come in, ignore current assumptions that may or may not be true, test them as much as we can with user research or testing, and try to present a fresh perspective of how to achieve their company's goals. And also help them sort of bridge cross-departmental divides politically and get people to line up on a course of action so they can move more efficiently. We can implement a thing fast and then let them keep building it and maintaining it over time. So it's actually a really good complement of things, right? And if we all went in-house somewhere, like, say somebody, I don't know, bank, bought Bearded and made us their internal team. I don't know, that's never happened before, right? But let's just say it had. We would lose a lot of our advantage, I think, because then we would become the in-house team. And I'm sure it would be a good in-house team and we'd be good at maintaining that product, but we'd lose that outside perspective and that sense of urgency. And we'd start becoming more concerned with maintaining and stability and all those things you need to do when you're maintaining a product over a long period of time.
Well, I think the other thing that goes into play for something like once a month meals or any really client is when they come to and I prefer the word studio to agency just because agency feels a little slimy to me and I don't know why.
No agency ever done anything slimy, Rob. I have no idea.
Totally a me problem, but I'm going to use the word studio.
Go for it. Just don't say shop.
Yeah. Okay.
Studio. There's like a caste system there that I don't like.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So we're no agencies, no shops, studios. We're good with studios, though, right?
Studio. Yeah. We wear fancy glasses and blazers. It's fine.
Okay. Is that one of the things that we offer is we have a ready-made team ready to roll. I have all the roles you need to build a software project. I've got architects, I've got UX people, I've got content strategists, project managers, front-end developers, back-end developers, designers. Everything we need. You say go, I'll have the entire team booted up and around your problem tomorrow on day one. If you want to go build that team, you're hiring probably 7 or 8 people to play all the different roles that are required to deliver successfully. There's a lot of companies out there that don't ever want to hire that many people. And that's what it
and
really
then
takes.
then they have to learn how to work together too, right? That's
Yeah,
going to take at least a year.
that's right. And one of the big things that I think that studios offer is this whole thing of showing up, knowing what they're doing, and getting moving very quickly. Like we have, one of the things that always comes up is like, well, some client, remember this conversation I had not too long ago was like, for what we pay you, I could hire, 2 people, and I said, and it wouldn't be enough. You're right. You could absolutely hire those people, and here's the problem though: the people you would hire, one, don't want to work by themselves that know what they're doing. Right? If you find a guy or a gal that wants to work by themselves, wants to be a lone wolf on this and own this all, you should be very scared. Developers and designers are social critters. We like our people. We like a pack. We need friends. We need ideas to bounce. We need to have conversations and solve problems. So this only works if you're willing to commit to hire an entire team with all the different roles and have all the different problems that encompasses. And that's why I think that studios offer a lot of value to get started and say, hey, bootstrap this thing for me.
Yeah, I like to think of the studio as kind of like an acting CTO at times, where you're coming up with this in strategy even from the point of like what the company needs, like who do you need to hire to make this technical product successful.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I was hoping to get your perspective on next was that role, like the entire studio as one role in an organization almost, except it also has more output than the typical CTO because it is doing design and everything too. But
I think one thing that relates to that is the fact that in that project cycle, or the product cycle really, there's a big bump in activity at the beginning of that cycle, right? So to Rob's point, they shouldn't hire 7 people to work on their project because they won't need them in 6 months. They might need 2 or 3 people in 6 months, but right now they need 7 people. So that's why it's actually much more cost effective and faster. It's going to take you a year to get all those people, if you can do it, and get them working together well, and then you can start work on your thing and launch it, right? So you spend a chunk of money to get these people working on it now, and then in a few months, then things can back off. Maintenance just isn't as heavy lifting generally as the initial launch.
Yeah, and to get back to kind of where you were going with the CTO stuff, like what you're talking about when we're able to play that role with a client, a startup, or whoever, that's worth its weight in gold. Like you're looking for a very particular person who can play that role, and I'm, not trying to say that look at us, we have a bunch of those people, but no, that's one of the things that we've tried to find is people that can speak into the business about what's going on with the technology and what's going on with the design and the user insights that takes a very senior person to be able to do. And one of the reasons that back to Matt's point about why we can do that is because we see a lot of different problems. We work in a lot of different industries. We're able to steal things for the work in one space and best practices and bring them to other spaces, and that works really well. So I think I think you were asking a longer question. I want to let you get back to that.
Well, well, I mean, the conversation kind of led me to maybe even a different question of like, what are the advantages of it seems like there are advantages to a studio acting in that role because they have these connections to people to help build a team. They know the industry much better than most people that are even going to come in a CTO role, because who is the company going to hire? They're probably going to hire someone that is either a CTO and has a team that they can't really steal from, or someone that's a manager and knows a limited team, and doesn't have exactly the draw. So a studio almost has this connection to a community and all kinds of people that it can help build a team a little bit more efficiently, and it also knows how to build a team because it's already done it internally.
And I think it also gives cheats to as you build your team slowly. One of the things we've seen with the OAM team is like I said before, hiring one person, be scared of that, right? Like one developer island is a scary place. That person is either, not going to, is the wrong fit, or is going to get very bored and leave. When working with somebody like us, and I'm sure Bearded the same way, is you hire somebody, they can come sit in my office. They are free to come join us here at Sparkbox headquarters and work with us, and we can be their team, in such a way that as they continue to grow and do that and train and be social, we can be that sounding board for those people, so they have time to hire those 5, 6, 7 roles that they need. And I think that's a huge advantage, because making the wrong hires is really, really expensive. And there's also a lot of risk in growing too quickly and not figuring out what exactly you need, and the cyclical nature of product and maintenance and all those things that Matt keeps talking about. Those are all realities. Especially if you're bootstrapping your startup.
And we, a lot of the organizations we have that already have teams, that's a big selling point for their managers and their C-level execs, is they're not just getting a chunk of code, they're getting development of their human resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like their team gets to learn stuff, and sometimes the people on their team are really excited about that too. Like we've had a couple of people, we're working with a team right now that just had to do a new hire, and they said one of the things they were happy about was that she was knew who Bearded was and was really psyched to be working with us, and that was like a selling point for the hire for her, which is really cool. But they get to, like Rob's saying, we become a bit of an incubator for them. We get to pass on a bunch of our knowledge, and we're not stingy about it. We want them to show up and work with us and learn everything they can, and be able to reproduce things, because it's in our best interest. They're going to be maintaining the product that we worked on, and if we want our work to look good long term, they need to do a good job. So we're excited about helping them learn how to do the things we do and replace us in the end.
Yeah, it's funny. Like one of the other areas besides startups that we do a lot of work with is we do a lot of work with really big enterprise e-commerce systems that want to move in a responsive direction. I'm under NDA, so I'm not going to mention any names, but you brands that you know. And one of the things that I constantly hear from our clients in those situations is, well, they have a team, they have a lot of developers in some cases, but what they don't have is the specific knowledge of translating how these new web technologies and techniques and scale up to the enterprise solution. Like how do we tackle a Fortune 100 company e-commerce site and make it responsive? What are the things to think about? How does this work? And they just want us to come in and lead their team along. We have some cases developers on their team working under us, working under our project managers, working with us, submitting pull requests, we're providing feedback, and we're leveling them up, and we're just giving them a head start. That's part of the partnership that we come into this with, right? That's one of the reasons why I think that we can charge what we do and work with the kind of clients we do, is because we are completely focused on making their business better than we found it. I know the Boy Scouts get a bad rap, but I always call it the Boy Scout model. I want to leave clients better than I found them all the time, and make sure that they're in a really good place. And that does a couple things. If you make, from just a business ROI point of view, even if we work ourselves out of a job in a big organization with one group, you better believe that there's somebody else in another group watching what's going on and being like, that guy got a lot of kudos for getting his team where he's going. Why we can work with them. That sounds good, and it allows you to cross-sell inside of these big organizations, and it's so much easier to work with other groups inside the same company than it is to find new clients. You've already got contracts in place. You already have a head start. You're already a vendor. All you really need is somebody who has the budget, and if there's a proven track record, everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to make the same kind of progress. Everybody wants to build their team. Everybody knows that having long-term situations with studios that are around forever isn't the best idea, and they want to find a way out of that. So why shouldn't that be part of our story, as when we are talking to new clients and saying, hey, we're focused on this. we want to be in a place where you can do this on your own. If you want to keep us around or have us work on new initiatives or whatever, we'd love to continue partnering with you. But at the end of the day, we want you to be able to stand on your own. Sorry, I got a little off topic there.
That's not off topic. I have an off-topic thing I'm going to throw in. Here's a curveball. Because we touched on it earlier, and I think it deserves a little follow-up. Besides just building good things, I think something that we're able to do in our position is help make sure we build the right thing by getting consensus from leadership in various departments that sometimes don't talk to each other. The best compliment I ever receive after a kickoff meeting is when people come up to me afterwards, and it happens more than you'd think it would. They come up and they're like, wow, we never actually sat down and talked to these people, like marketing and IT and whoever. Like we never sat down and said, why is it like that? And I never knew it was like that because of that. Nobody ever asked that question when we were all in the room before. I always just assumed it had to be that way, and they assumed it had to be that way for some other reason. We were just doing a stupid thing for the last 5 years, you know, because everybody assumed somebody else said it had to be that way. Now we realize we all hate it. We even had one thing where everyone we interviewed in this thing kept saying, oh, you have to keep this one thing. The CEO loves it. It's his thing. He really loves it. You can't change that. And we're like, all right. And we finally interviewed the CEO and said, so what do you think about this thing? He goes, oh, no, we didn't even bring it up. He said, if there's one thing I want you to change, it's this thing. I hate that thing. And it was the thing everybody said the CEO loved, and you couldn't change it. It was amazing. So like those kinds of things are great. And I think the key to that is designing meetings really well. And we learned a heck of a lot about this from a guy named Kevin Hoffman, who you may or may not be aware of, but he writes for List Apart and NetMag, and he has this book coming out pretty soon this year from Rosenfeld Media called Meeting Design. And as soon as that book comes out, anybody who's interested in watching this podcast should buy the heck out of it and then give it as Christmas presents to all their friends, because it's a huge game changer for us, as trite as that term is. It allowed us to really wrangle. What happened to us is we had a project where I went into a room with 15 stakeholders from a large nonprofit and came out feeling like I'd been beat up in a boxing match. Like that book was not, or the book, sorry, Rob pasted a book link. That meeting did not go well for me. And normally I'm pretty good at just improvising and making a meeting come out okay. But I was outnumbered and it didn't work out. So we brought Kevin in to help us the next time we had to sit down with those same people, and it went like gangbusters. And partly because of the attention and organization and upfront work he did to make that meeting happen well. And after that, it just totally changed our process. So yeah, I recommend that. And you can also look up Kevin in general and just read the articles that he has for free that are out there, and I'll throw that in here too.
Any quick tips for those initial setup meetings from Kevin's insight?
Do research, first of all. So before we do a kickoff meeting, we hold stakeholder interviews, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to avert a swoop and poop. If you're not familiar with the term swoop and poop, a swoop and poop is when you're working on a project, everything seems to be going great, you've been talking to stakeholders, you think you're designing the right thing, and then all of a sudden somebody goes, oh man, Bill from this VP from marketing, we really should have Bill take a look at it. And you're like, who's Bill? And you're like, oh, it'll be fine, but he has a big interest in this project, and he's going to want to take a look at it. And you're like, Bill, where'd Bill come from? And then Bill shows up to the meeting and he tells you everything you did is wrong. You have to start all over. It can't be like that because of some requirement nobody else knew about, and then leaves. And so he swooped in, he pooped all over the project and left. And you've got 2 weeks left in the project to completely change course, and you're SOL at that point. So that's what we try to avoid. So I actually usually start off when we're arranging the kickoff meeting talking to our contacts and saying, here's what a swoop and poop is. Who's going to swoop and poop us? Let's find those people and make sure we interview them and put them in the kickoff meeting.
Yep.
So you do those interviews, you gather requirements, and you tend to see patterns form about either things people are giving you conflicting answers about, like this person over here is telling you it has to be this way, someone else is telling you have to be the opposite, and you're like, okay, there's some discord in the organization around these themes. Or they're all saying, oh, God, this is a huge problem. We need to solve this problem. And you're like, okay, there's some consensus there around this theme. We have to figure out how to solve that big problem. And you come up with these priorities and themes for the kickoff workshop that you either have to get consensus on or come up with a solution for and get everybody's buy-in on. You want the overall direction for the thing. Here are our goals, and these are the priority of them, and everything we do for the next X weeks is going to be based around that. Then you walk into that kickoff and you run them through a series of exercises that help the people in that room come to the same realizations that you have from interviewing each of them. And at the end of it, then, they're all aligned based on the fact that they have together discovered that this is the big thing, this is the big problem, this is the big solution. And we found when you do that and you get everyone aligned like that, the whole rest of the project is a million times easier because everyone has already they've been heard, first of all, so they feel better about things. They feel like their input is listened to and valued. And then not only that, you did listen and you did value it and you work it into the stuff that you build. So the things you build reflect their concerns. So they're going to be more happy with them in general.
Yeah, I think that's, it's funny, like, Ben and I talk a lot about, like, how the fact that almost every project organization we get involved with now, seems like it starts with, yeah, we have this web project, we need to fix it, and what it turns into is organizational consulting. And for the longest time, I didn't feel qualified to do it. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not a management, I'm not going to, but eventually it was like, no, this is the frickin' job. The problems that you're experiencing on your web project aren't about, the people being dumb or not knowing what to build. It's that you have these stupidly structured organizations that pit people against each other and do things and, like, get in and tell them, like, okay, we have to have the right players in the room. Similar to Matt, we talk a lot. One of the first questions I love asking, new clients is, like, who can kill this project? I want to know everybody's name who can kill this project. Who are the swoop and poopers? But I want to know, and then I want to talk to them. I love to talk to those people, and I want to speak. I want to hear what their pet issue is, and I want to know what it is so that every other time I talk to them, I can bring it back to them. I want to make it about those people. Even if the bigger project's not, how do I figure out how to make, when I'm talking with that person or that person's in the room, them feel heard, important, and that we've considered it. And even cases where we've taken their pet thing and killed it or not done it because it didn't make sense for part of the project, I'll just say it. I'm like, yeah, we heard that this thing was really important, but what we found is that we can accomplish this in some other way. Or, well, the overall organizational goal was to do this, and this part really didn't belong here. Just by saying that, they know that you've heard them, that you've considered it, and you considered the greater good. And just by lining it up like that, all of a sudden you've put them in the position of saying how it's not for the greater good, and how that their thing should be more important to the greater good than what the team has collectively decided. There's a bunch of tips and tricks and that kind of stuff, and making friends and influencing people. It's a great read. But you line yourself with people's pet goals, and you go there, and it totally works.
Well, what you're saying, Rob, is that you're giving context to their concerns. That you're acknowledging their concerns and saying that they're valid, and then giving them a framework to think about them that everyone can share.
Yeah.
So we recently did a kickoff organization with I don't know, a bunch of stakeholders, a bunch of people, and a lot of them were sort of like department head kind of things, and they all had their one thing. This is my thing. And they would even say stuff like, I know nobody else cares about this thing but me, but it's really important to me, and I think it should be the most important thing on the website. And so we went through and did exercises. We let everybody voice all those concerns, and then as a group, we prioritized stuff. Yep. And they got to have their say about it, but at the end of the day, they were kind of going like, okay, I get it. I get that that's just my thing, and I get that it has its place on the website, and it can't be at the top. I know my website would look like this, but I get that our user's website has to look like that.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's huge.
That's just a factor of bad organizations that give people objectives that are for their piece that they need to solve, or you've put all of the onus of a pain point on a specific organization where they become myopic and they can only see that my needs aren't being addressed, no one hears me. And really, what I think happens with a lot of internal teams is if somebody becomes, that's their hammer they're carrying around, and they hit every problem with it, that they start getting ignored.
Yeah.
And simply not ignoring them goes so far.
Mm-hmm.
So all that stuff sounds like a good way to ensure that uh, at the handoff you have the right product. Has there been any instances where you were confident you had the right product and you delivered the right product, but then uh, after the handoff you kind of felt this blame for something that went wrong with
Oh, sure.
the team that took over messing it up, or uh,
You know,
any insight there?
I've there's a one of the guys here at Bearded had spent time in another consultancy before, and I remember he says that they told him someone was complaining about getting thrown under the bus by a client, and his manager told him, "You're a consultant. Your job is to get thrown under the bus by the client. That's part of why you're here." And that's pretty cynical, but it does happen occasionally. There are situations out of your control. We had a client not too long ago where they were going through major organizational upheaval the entire time we were engaged. And we had new contact every 2 weeks. And there was nothing we could do about it. And when we got to the end, the person who ended up in control of the project felt completely differently about the other people at the beginning of the project about what we were supposed to do, and basically wanted to roll back everything we'd done and just kind of CYA. As we don't change anything, requirements don't change, and no one's going to blame me for anything going wrong. And you know, there's not a lot you can do about that. I mean, my first reaction is to like march in there and start talking to everybody and saying, like, this is wrong. You're building a bad product now, and this is politics, and this is dumb. But that's not going to help. I mean, if anything, it's just going to make everybody look bad and feel bad. So there was a certain point where I just had to let go and say, like, sometimes you write the check, you get what you want, and do whatever you want with it, and we're going to have to move on. I also decided I didn't really want to work with that client anymore because of those problems, and it was just a bad fit. And that's okay too. One of my favorite graphic designers is Paula Scher from Pentagram, and she has a great thing in her book, Make It Bigger, where she talks about client relationships like this. She's a very smart woman, and one of the things she says is the biggest thing that makes a difference in your project is if you have a strong client contact on the other side, someone who is a project champion, someone who has the initiative and the power and the strength to push forward good ideas and push back on things they think are bad. Whether or not they completely agree with you is irrelevant, but you need somebody with vision and a little bit of chutzpah to fight for things on their side. If you don't have that person, it will always languish. And if you do have that person, you can be pretty sure you're going to succeed. So when we start talking to clients, we really try to ferret out if that person is obviously there or not. And if we see that person there, we're going to work really hard to get that project.
Yep, we actually require in a lot of our contracts that we identify a point person that can be the champion, and if nothing else, that person at least is appointed, and then it's the exercise of figuring out if they have the real authority or not. But that's okay, because even if they don't have the real authority, your lot has been cast together, and your job is to figure out and work. So much. So much of the job, it seems, of big organizations is understanding the organizational politics and speaking into it and being able to say, okay, here's how this works. This is broken. Let's figure out how to make this better. There's so much power that you can get from coming in from the outside. The more you charge, the more people will listen to you. And I wish it wasn't this way, but like in a former life, I was consultant that worked in the financial industry, and one of the things that I'd be brought in for rescue missions and things like that, where if things were going really, really poorly at these big banks, I would go in, and I got to the point what I would do is I would walk up and I would sit down next to the developers who already worked there, and I would say, listen, here's the deal. I'm here, and I would like you to tell me all of your pet things that you think ought to be done to this system, because you're way closer to it. And this is your chance to get them done. If you can convince me, I will tell your boss, and they will do it. And they would look at me like, well, that's not fair. I'm like, no, it's not fair, but that's how this works. They're paying me several $100s an hour, and I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. At the end of this, I can help you accomplish all these goals. If you fight me, I'm still going to win, and I still get to leave. But this is your chance for us to line up and get this stuff done for you. And a couple guys tell me where to go, and a couple people. There's one gentleman in particular that I remember looked at me and said, okay, and he actually handed me a document of all the proposals that he wanted to do, and I just put them in my document, almost word for word, and half of them got approved the next day. Stupid, like, and like it just.
I'm fond of saying, Rob, and this applies to development as well, but good design is easy. Good design that sees the light of day is hard.
Yeah.
And I find the longer I'm in business doing this stuff, the more of my job is about making sure we're designing the right thing and making sure everybody agrees about what that right thing is and then delivering that right thing. And I mean, frankly, you can design the most beautiful thing in the world, but if it's solving the wrong problems, your design is crap.
Yep, absolutely.
I love that amnesty you get whenever you come into a project as a consultant, and you can say this is crap in its current state, but if you do that on an internal team, you're going to be a black sheep, and everyone's going to be really mad at you.
Well, just make sure you smile when you say it.
That's, yeah, but they're
the trick.
They're paying you to come in and say this is crap, basically, and then how to fix it. So it's a wonderful thing in a way, and you get to get pet projects done for the guy that hands you documents. I love that story. That guy was probably so happy.
Oh, he was thrilled. And I've been on cases where I've been the scapegoat. Like, I've gone into a client and they were looking for someone to blame. Like, I like to say sometimes that I have been yelled at in almost every single state by somebody who runs some kind of company, and I'm really, really good at being yelled at. I take it pretty well. There is no virgin ground left on my behind. It's all been chewed. And that's okay. Like, that's sometimes part of the role as well. Like, sometimes that's part of the job, is being a scapegoat. And, not that I want to set myself up to that, but that's what happens. Conflict's going to happen. Conflict is how we get stronger and build teams and build relationships. I've spent most of my career trying to become the most comfortable person you'll meet with conflict, and I'm reasonably confident that any room I walk into at this point, that I'm the most comfortable person in there, and that gives me freedom to say my mind, to be brutally honest if I have to be, and to just tell them what I think. And if they don't like it, then they're free to find somebody else. If they're looking for someone to tell them what they want to hear, I've never been the right person to bring in.
Well, ironically, I'm about to be confrontational with your idea of conflict. I think telling people they want to hear, I agree with you on that. You got to tell people the right thing. But there are also ways to tell people things that you are more likely to get the outcome that you want.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So there's a certain amount of psychology and social dynamics that you plug into those things. That's what's the right moment and with the right people in the room to say these things to make sure they actually happen correctly.
Yep.
And that's just something I think you learn over time by screwing up, by saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment, going, well, that didn't go very well.
And I completely agree. I completely agree with that. But there are some places I've been into where the culture is conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking for I worked at a place where step one on any given project was to identify the scapegoat.
Oh, is this Amazon?
No, I'm not giving names.
I'm just kidding. That New York Times article, though.
I have never worked at Amazon. And,
no, of course, me neither. I just read that article.
Yes, I have read the article. I've got friends that work there. Enough said. But they would identify the scapegoat. That was step one. Identify a scapegoat, make sure it's not you, and then plot the seeds to make sure that the right person got blamed. If things were poorly.
I bet they had very good product development there.
No, they was horrible.
Yeah.
And there was times when you just had to look at people and be like, you are sabotaging your own success. There is no way to sugarcoat that.
Right. Your culture is terrible.
Yeah, you need to fix this. No wonder I'm here, and I won't be here for long. If yeah.
It's interesting. One of the things we're talking about is there's a certain amount of health in the organization that, as a consultant, you cannot surmount. There are times when you go in and things are so bad that there's very little you can do to fix things or create good outcomes. And that's part of why we like to start a lot of engagements with research phases. where we spend a short amount of time trying to understand the product, trying to understand the problem, and understand the people that are involved. And if we get a really bad feeling about it in that research phase, we're not going to continue working with them. And that's actually not just a service to us and keeping ourselves happy. I think it's a huge service to them. If they engage us for 3 weeks and we find out that our hunch is we're not going to have a successful result working with them, and so we don't schedule another 16 weeks of work, we just save them a ton of money. It's a beautiful thing for everyone.
It is. Like, that's why I love dating clients, with those initial engagements and projects before we get involved in a long-term thing. That's as much for my health and happiness as it is for them.
I think short, low-risk engagements before committing to a thing is really good for everyone involved.
It is, and I care too much about our team and our culture to put us in bad situations long term.
Yeah, and so
now we've gone way off the rails.
Yeah.
Justin's like, okay, come back. Hold
on. No, this conversation has been incredibly insightful, and I think there's going to be like quotables for years in this conversation. And I'm just going to change the title to Kickoffs, Handoffs, and Relationships in general. And there we go. And the whole thing is, all relevant. But we're running low on time, so I want to get to like some more like straightforward things, just some kind of quick hits for maybe people that are doing this that might be looking for answers. And the first one we just talked about was this engagement length. Do you have any kind of recommendations for like even like specific numbers of like, let's do a 3-week thing and then let's do a 16-week thing and then let's cut it off?
And I just threw my I wrote a column entry on the list apart called "Let's Do It. What Are We Doing?" That's about doing research phases before you begin the main thing. So there's a lot more detail there. But typically what we tell clients is, there's a range of stuff. We do research phases that generally run from like 1.5 weeks to maybe 4 or 5 weeks, depending on the complexity of the problem. And it really just depends on what we're trying to solve. We have initial phone conversations with them, and our hunch is this is a small project. It's a brochure site. It's not a big deal. Maybe it's only a week with a few days of planning and wrangling beforehand in the previous week. If it's a big, gigantic site, recently we just finished a research phase for the Carnegie Libraries of Pittsburgh that they've got a ton of content, thousands and thousands of pages of content, and some pretty complicated workflows. So we spent 4 weeks just trying to understand the user experience and content of their system. Likewise for more complicated web applications, it would be longer, but it also depends on what we're trying to accomplish. One of the goals, of course, is to wrap your head around the scope of the next phase so you can accurately predict what you're going to do for that next chunk of time and give them a real cost for the rest of it. But to get there, there are specific things you have to do. And that may mean you're actually like sketching views, like what does a homepage look like? What do these detail views look like? It may mean you're defining content types. It may mean you're drawing a new sitemap. It may mean you're looking at specific processes, like say, scheduling an appointment with a doctor and how that workflow goes. There are lots of things you could deliver. So we usually have like a vague list of here are all the things we might give you. And as we get through that first kickoff on that week 1, we come out with a strategy document that defines what the things we're going to address are, and then we spend the rest of the time doing stuff that supports that strategy.
Yep, that's pretty close. Like we do pretty much exactly that. We want to embrace the fact that we'll know more about your project tomorrow than we do today. We want to embrace that learning. One of the things that we've found is that the company can have a great culture and we can be really good at what we do, and we're not exactly compatible working together. Our cadence is different. We want to behave differently than they want us to behave, and like that doesn't mean that either one of us is right or wrong. It just means that maybe there's a better fit out there. Like, we want to discover that. So our initial engagements, we usually use 2 weeks as kind of the starting place, and it usually is at least 2 weeks, and sometimes it gets a little bit longer depending on the complexity. And it's priced just like everything else for us. It's billed hourly. We have deliverables. We do our status meetings. We figure out what we're trying to do for the next phase, and that it funnels. So usually, even before we do the kickoff, sometimes we'll say, "Hey, we've had an hour conversation with you. your total project smells to be in this price range. Maybe it's that point. It's this is a $250,000 to $500,000 project. Do initial engagement with us, and we'll narrow that in. Um, and there's no other way to do it, because that's some of the most valuable work we do, is defining what the right thing to build is. Do that initial learning. Make our initial recommendations. The other thing that works really, really, really well about initial engagements is if you can get that price point down, usually the person you're talking to has the authority to approve a 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 budget and get a contract with purchasing, become a vendor with that client, where they probably would have to go up several levels to convince somebody to sign a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 project. So what that means is you can get in, you can be a vendor, you can do your negotiation on all your terms, your MSA, all of your contract pieces, and then when you go to give them the bigger piece of it, because it's going to cost more, it's all that piece is already done. You become the vendor of least resistance.
It's just a statement of work at that point, which is way easier than a master service agreement. Right?
And you have a track record. You actually have things that aren't spec work or other people's problems that you've made progress on. One of the things we've seen that is successful with that is we now do our initial engagements and we price them a certain way with hourly billing and all that other fun stuff. But if you continue on and do the next project with us, we credit some of that time back. They give you an incentive to do the bigger project and stick with us. If not, we're happy to give you all the things that we did. It's all work for hire. You own all of the content, everything we built, and you're free to go find someone else you want to work with, if that's or do it internally or whatever. But if you want to stick with us, we already have a vendor. We're already a vendor. We have a contract in place, and we'll actually give you some. There's a carrot there, a credit to continue working with us.
I think there's a built-in credit or carrot there also, which is just it's so much easier to keep working with these people that you've already got an established relationship with. You have lines of communication. You know how they work. You don't have to just meeting and learning how to talk to new people is kind of a pain, right? And getting them up to speed on the project. So it's way easier to just keep rolling. So as long as you do a good job, everyone's going to want you to keep working for another phase. Another thing I mentioned directly to your question earlier about the prices and weeks and things like that, I'll often give them examples of other projects we've done recently and say, well, we did 16 weeks with this client recently, and here's what came out of it. Here's what we handed to them at the end. We did 6 weeks with this client. Here's what we handed them at the end. We did 25 weeks with this client. Here's what we handed them at the end. And that way they can look at that and say, okay, our project seems kind of like this thing, or maybe between this and that, or whatever. And then they can budget it. And we do a similar pricing structure to Sparkbox, but we do weekly-based billing pricing instead of hourly. So we say a person costs this much per week, and you have this many people on the team that week. And so then we just tell them, here's what a week costs. Multiply it by however many weeks we're going to work, and that's how much your project's going to cost. So though I can't tell you how much your project costs right now, because I don't know how big it is, I can give you the mechanics to calculate that pretty easily, and some examples that'll get you in the ballpark.
Yep. Yeah.
That way there's no hidden stuff. They're not like, oh, he's just going to make up a bigger number later. No, we're going to. Yeah. And sometimes the constraint comes on their end. Well, they'll say it has to be delivered in 8 weeks. And I'm like, there you go. The most we can do is 8 weeks. Or they'll say our budget cap is at $200,000. And we're like, okay, well, the most we can do is this many weeks in. Divide that by the weekly rate. And then we go from there. And we may not need all of that time, but we know that's the maximum we're gonna spend.
Yeah. I mean, and all this, the whole thing, the initial engagement, this whole piece, right, is about limiting the surprises. Like I saw someone on Twitter, I think it was Erica Hall, said, the best surprise is no surprise when it comes to client projects.
Yep.
Let's make things as transparent as possible so that there is no, the worst thing in the world is when you get, a couple weeks into it and you're a couple weeks off course. That's one of the reasons we love hourly billing or weekly billing. Same in my mind, it's just
different
time. But we do weekly invoicing, we do all this stuff, and it's so that we can't get that far off track before the client has the ability to say, "Whoa, where are you going?" And it's very transparent. They're in control of the process. It's a mutual beneficial relationship that allows us to iterate towards and learn the right solution together. I think there's a whole nother like hour we could probably do, if not several, on pricing and positioning and
Did we do
business
that
models and
last
all of that.
time?
Yeah,
Did we talk
no,
about pricing last time?
no, we talked about how we could do a whole hour on pricing. I think we should
Oh,
soon.
we totally could. I think that like pricing and positioning and business models are something that I have a lot of thoughts on. But so I'm going to stop talking about those now, and we'll go back to Justin.
um, and okay, so I have one more final kind of detail-oriented question. Is like structuring contracts around maintenance and handoff. Uh, how do you typically structure your contracts in that way? Like, do you build that right in and say, okay, we'll be available for maintenance for this long for this much money on a retainer basis, something like that? Do you have any tips for that? Either of you?
We tend not to do maintenance on things that we build. So either it's the internal teams taking care of it, or if not, we have a company here in the region that we build that into the contract and say these guys are going to handle it. They're a little cheaper. They're set up to do maintenance. They're structured around it. We're moving on to another sprint, another project after this. We're just that's not how we're. I think it's a different structure that
Yeah.
would benefit you.
Yep, we do a lot of maintenance. We do a lot of long-term engagements. We have a lot of companies we've worked with for a long, long time. Um, I think that that's something that's core to our business. Like about 50% of our revenue year over year comes from existing clients, and 50% comes from new clients. And so we definitely talk and find people we can partner with long term. So maintenance is totally part of it. So we do because the way we do our pricing is really easy. It's all hourly. We have clients that give us a budget. Like I've got a couple clients that say, "Hey, I want to spend X number of hours a month on maintenance," and we're allowed to spend that money on their project without really asking or really explaining what we're doing for them. We're keeping the system up to date. We're doing the upgrades. We're maybe moving from one version of keeping the gyms up to date or doing an Ember upgrade, and we can kind of schedule that work. Um, so we work that out still as a base hourly model, and most of our SOWs read something like this: hourly work as directed at this rate. So that can be whatever they want, and they see those invoices every week, and they can stop us if they want. But we still do that hourly, and what we typically tell clients is that, hey, we do maintenance between business hours 9 to 5. Um, if you have a production emergency, we drop other things to deal with your problem. We are always available to work production issues. If you call us after hours, our rate goes to time and a half. That's the inconvenience fee because we pay our people if they're working after hours time and a half of their normal salary. Um, and for small requests that anything less than 5 or 6 hours, we have a large enough team where we can usually work that in within the same week or the next week. For bigger tasks, if you want to add new features or do some bigger things, we estimate that and calendar it. Depending on where we're at right now, we can. It might be a month, it might be 2 months to get to a bigger task, but usually it's within a month for the bigger stuff because of slack time and other things that we can kind of move things around. But we have other clients that say, hey, I want to reserve this much of your time every month, and I'll come up with features. And we just do it that way, and we do it hourly. Um,
I think not being tied to feature milestones and scope in a contract is really, really helpful. I think that's something Rob and I both agree on a lot. Is it sets up some bad motivations, especially if you have payment milestones attached to those things. It's
yep.
basically disincentivizing approval. It's saying as long as you keep telling me it's not what you want, you don't have to pay me. And why would I set up that motivation? That's not good for the project. And it's not good for anybody.
And,
But having the flexibility to change course is part of what makes us useful. So
yep.
in our case, it's like you've booked us for some number of weeks, and we're going to have a plan at the beginning that we start out with. But as requirements change and information changes, or things don't go the way we thought they were going to, maybe an approach seemed like a good idea, and we start prototyping and it seems terrible. We're going to shift course. We're not just going to see out that plan so that we hit a milestone and deliver the thing we said we would and get our check. we're going to change course and do something better if that presents itself. We'll talk to them about it first. We won't just change things willy-nilly. But I think there's a good compromise to make between having a plan and not being beholden to the plan if it's not working out.
Yep, and I would say it goes even bigger than that a little bit, Matt. It goes back to what you're selling. What's your business model? What am I selling to my clients? I am not selling a website. I'm selling our brains on your problem for a certain period of time. I'm selling you access to people who are very capable. If you happen to direct us to build a website, then yeah, you own the website at the end of it, but that's not what I'm selling. I'm convinced that the thing that a developer or designer produces at the end isn't near as valuable as him or her knowing what to design and what to code as they go along and the problem solving that goes with it. If you know exactly what you want, exactly what you need, and you can detail it out and spec it out in a 400-page design spec, then please, please, please go overseas and get a developer that'll do that for you, or a designer. You'll get exactly what you pay for. But that's not how anybody actually works. We sell the process of learning and adjusting and iterating through that. We sell access.
If you think you can see the final solution at the beginning of the project, you're in trouble. First of all, you're wrong, and I guess you're deluded as well. That's crazy, and it's also wasting a ton of time trying to define a thing that you probably isn't the right solution. And we went down a road, I don't know about you guys, but we went down a road early on at Bearded where like accurate spec was the goal. We thought that's what was going to save us. And we kept, you kept getting to the ends of projects and things went over budget and they didn't go quite as you wanted and you had to add more features and do stuff and you're like, oh, we just got to get the spec tighter and we have to have our contracts tighter and everything has to be defined. And we went down that road of like details and more detail and structure. And it wasn't helping at all because it turns out no matter how much you document a thing, there are always infinite ways to interpret that document, no matter how hard you try. English, communications are mushy, and our brains are even mushier when they try to read those languages. So it doesn't really make sense. So we just inverted it and went the other way. We said instead of having a really structured system, let's just have an unstructured system that allows us the flexibility that you actually need to do these things.
Yep. Nope. Yep.
Great.
Okay. I'm gonna let Justin, close us out because if you give us a new topic, we'll go forever.
I know, and I gotta go. I got deadlines today.
I'm gonna stop asking questions because it'll just turn into more and more knowledge. More
Dubious as it may be.
More than fits in a podcast. So I'm just gonna close this out here. Thank you guys once again. That's really what I want to do here is thank you for all of this knowledge. It's incredibly useful.
Hey, thank you, Justin.
Yeah. But also I want to give you a chance to, plug in anything that you're working on maybe again. It's to close the show because we did it at the beginning. I want to make sure everyone knows how to get more insights from you if they're interested in talking to you or how to work with you guys or whatever you want to share. So, Matt?
Okay. If you want to get in touch with me about doing work, here's Bearded, bearded.com. That is us. And I guess if you want to get in touch with me more specifically about speaking or writing or whatever, I guess you can go to this not often used URL, which is matt-griffin.com, and it's got some things on it.
Great. Rob?
Yep. If you want to get in touch with Sparkbox, go to csparkbox.com. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that is through the Twitters. If you're interested in what I have to say, I've got a couple events coming up. I'll be at the Digital Project Manager Summit this year, which is in Philly, which is going to be a great time talking about project management. I'm also going to be at BDConf and DC. Those are going to be two great events. Come out, say hi. I'm going to be at DC.
I'll see you. Patrick and I are going to be there too. That'll be great.
We're both going to be there. You can get us both at DC, apparently. Come on out and say hi.
Great. My Twitter is mostly full of nonsense, but it's Justin X Reese. That's the best way to contact me as well. I'm always, responding to any mentions. I love Twitter as a way to communicate with people, so that's my main goal there. If you want to take a chance and work with BuilderWorks on these issues that these guys are insightfully helping me with, you can go to builderworks.co and fill out the forms there and contact me directly. And all right, thank you guys again. And this, I hope everyone got some useful information on this. Bye.
Yeah, it was lots of fun, Justin. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.